What do the four beasts that surround the throne of God have to do with the Tetraevangelion, or the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Welcome to Beyond the Verse, where we will briefly explore these strange beings that live in the presence of the Lord, and their likely counterfeits on earth. In Revelation 4, verses 6 through 8, it says, "And before the throne was something like a sea of glass, as clear as crystal. In the center around the throne were four living creatures covered with eyes in front and back. The first living creatures was like a lion, the second like a calf, the third had a face like a man, and the fourth was like an eagle in flight. And each of the four living creatures had 6 wings that was covered with eyes all around and within. Day and night they never stopped saying, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.'" These living beings are eternal worshipers located at the epicenter of God's presence. Being covered in eyes is symbolic of divine perception and cosmic awareness, and likely reflects the omnipotence and omnipresence of God. The faces of these creatures represent the full spectrum of creation: the wild animal with the lion, the domesticated animal with the ox, humanity, which is man, and the heavens, represented by the eagle. What John documented here on the island of Patmos in the 1st century was likely what originated in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, where they are described as awe-inspiring beings unlike anything earthly. Verse 5 mentions their human-like appearance. Verse 6 says that they each had 4 faces and 4 wings. Verse 7 talks about how the legs were straight and the feet were like calves' hooves, gleaming like polished bronze. Verse 8 says that they had human hands under their wings, on all 4 sides. In verse 10 it says, "The form of their faces was that of a man, and each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, and also the face of an eagle. Each creature had 4 faces, one on each side of the head. The human face in front, the lion face to the right, the ox face on the left, and the eagle face on the back." Verses 11 through 14 describe more about the details about its 4 wings, where they were placed, and how they covered their bodies. Their movement is also peculiar, as it says they moved in perfect unison, straight forward without turning in verse 12, where it also says that it was the Spirit which led this entire creature. It describes their movement as being like flashes of lightning, a critical touchstone between the seen and unseen realms. Verses 15 through 21 outlines the popular wheel within a wheel, where it was once again full of eyes and had multi-directional movement. The chapter also describes their sounds and their wings, which were like rushing waters. These creatures appear again in Ezekiel 10, where they are explicitly called cherubim. And finally in Revelation 4, where we first started, where these 4 creatures are clearly described, sitting around the throne, worshiping the Lord. Early church fathers like Irenaeus and Jerome believed these 4 creatures represented the 4 Gospels. The lion represented Matthew, Jesus as king. The ox represented Mark, Jesus as servant. Man was represented by Luke, Jesus as Son of Man, and the eagle was represented in John, Jesus as Son of God. These 4 living creatures became the embodied proclamation of the gospel from heaven's throne. The early church fathers believed that these aspects were the pinnacle attributes of creation, with the lion being authority and courage, the ox being strength and service, man being intelligence and wisdom, and the eagle being swiftness and spiritual heights. And of course, one of the more fascinating parts about the 4 creatures that surround the throne of God and have peculiar sights and sounds according to Ezekiel 1 is found in what might be the counterfeit of such creatures. We read in Daniel 7, where Daniel declared, "In my vision in the night I looked, and suddenly the four winds of heaven were churning up the great sea. Then four great beasts came up out of the sea, each one different from the others." Of course, the great sea represented the realm of chaos and rebellion. And in verse 4, it says, "The first beast was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted up from the ground, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and given the mind of a man." Considering the fact that the 4 cherubim who surround the throne of God are represented as a man, a lion, and an eagle, suggests that whatever is going on here with what Daniel saw, which appears again in Revelation 13, is some kind of abominable science experiment gone wrong in order to try to create a divine cherubim. Verse 5, it says, "Suddenly another beast appeared, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, so it was told, 'Get up and gorge yourself on flesh.'" Bear having 3 ribs in his mouth and between its teeth suggests something akin to God removing a rib from Adam to make Eve. The fact that this bear creature is gorging on flesh leaves little wiggle room for what it might mean, at least in the context of a counterfeit to the cherubim who surround God's throne. Then in verse 6, it tells of a leopard who had on its back 4 wings like those of a bird, with 4 heads, and given authority to rule. Here we have the leopard synonymous with the conglomerate beast that has properly the 4 wings and the 4 heads, much like one of God's cherubim. This beast destroys much. And a deeper dive into verse 7 and verse 8 reveals how the little horn that arises and takes hold of this beast is the man of sin. The parallel passage to this description in Daniel 7 is found in Revelation 13, where John outlines the same beast with the lion, leopard, and bear, each having its own characteristics, and the dragon giving the power and throne and great authority over to this beast. And there is one more potential connection to the 4 beasts which are found in the 4 horsemen of Revelation 6. Each horseman has its own flavor of chaos, with the first being conquest, then war, then famine, then death. Could these be the potential consequences of the false beast, much like the consequences of the 4 beasts around God's throne are simply in eternal state of worship? And so through this brief survey of the 4 beasts, we can clearly start to see patterns where God's throne establishes a particular order, and man, with the help of God's adversaries, creating an abominable copy or clone, attempting to display authority and power. It all points back to the Lamb. In Revelation 5:6, it says, "Then I saw a lamb who appeared to have been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures." Despite how powerful these 4 cherubim appear to be, they bow before him, casting their crowns and worshiping the one worthy to open the scroll. If you find this research helpful and interesting, tune into Canary Cry Clubhouse, hosted by my co-host of Canary Cry Radio and News Talk, Basil Rosewater, every Thursday, where he extends the discussion around these Beyond the Verse videos. You can even call in to share your thoughts and opinions. And make sure to tune into Canary Cry News Talk twice a week to get news deconstruction and analysis from a biblical perspective. Thanks for watching, and God bless.